Here we are, on the shores of what is now De Soto National Memorial in Bradenton, Florida, where in May of 1539, Hernando De Soto and his army of men made landfall and forever changed the lives of the Native American people. How did he get here, you ask? Well, with me, the Astrolabe Navigation. I am the reason they were able to navigate the waters of the Tampa shores to search the land for the riches that King Charles V sought after. To help you understand how these events all work together, we have to go back to my origin. From there, we will talk about how I helped De Soto to Tampa and how in doing so changed the Native American lives on this bay forever. To begin, we're going to start with my makers. Diogenes Lacerio, born in 3rd century AD. Berosio el Caldeo, or as he would originally say it, Perseus Caldicius of the 3rd century AD. And last, but certainly not least, Archimedes, the most famous mathematician and inventor in ancient Greece. When I was first made, I was built to help calculate time for astronomers. My basic functions were to check the location of different stars, as well as tell the height and position of those said stars. It was not until the mid-15th century that sailors would be able to use me on their journeys to find new worlds.
Now, the astrolabe is a wonderful abbreviation, or wonderful symbol for the technical sophistication of Islamic civilization. If you didn't know what they were, if you didn't know how they were used, you could put one on your wall and it would be beautiful. They're a sign of conspicuous consumption. But when you hold an astrolabe in your hand, you're holding a model of the universe as it was then understood. You can use it to do sophisticated calculations just by turning the dials, telling time at night. Imagine that, right? Without doing any calculations at all. It does it all for you. It's all built into the astrolabe. Now, as far as the transmission of scientific knowledge to Europe is concerned from Islam, which is a major research concern of mine at the moment, we can actually show that one of the first vectors of that transmission to Western Europe were astrolabes from Spain, one of the border countries. Now, when the astrolabe first went into Europe, no European could understand it, but it was a thing that intrigues people. I mean, no matter who you are, if you're a human being, you have your inquisitive mind. I mean, Aristotle, right, said man's a thinking animal, right? We want to figure things out. It doesn't matter who it is, you give them a machine, they're going to want to learn how, they're going to figure out how it works. Well, that's what happened in Europe. And in figuring out how the astrolabe worked, how it was designed, how to use it, this really got the revival of mathematics and science and astronomy going in Europe again. So that's how important the astrolabe was. So within a century or so, Europeans were making astrolabes almost on the level of Islamic creations. And then they become really popular as time goes on. And so you can go to museums, and like the Museum of the History of Science at Oxford has a ton of Islamic astrolabes in cases and a ton of European ones.
With my help in his journeys.
In 1537, he wanted to return to the New World as a governor of Guatemala. Joseph V instead sent him to Cuba as a governor of Cuba with an appointment to explore the areas presently known as Florida.
After an almost year-long stop in Cuba, De Soto's fleet finally made landfall at Tampa Bay on May 25, 1539.
For the next 3 or 4 years, Hernando De Soto explored most of present-day Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and more than likely also Arkansas.
Our encounters with the local Indians came swiftly. They used the tropical woodlands to their advantage. They were like ghosts, first there and then gone again. But we were on alert, and once we engaged them in a skirmish, they were quickly overwhelmed by our weapons and brute force. But in one of the first encounters, we were taken completely by surprise. Not by an ambush, but by what we heard during the fight.
Via! Tesa via! Cristiano! Cristiano! Tesa via! Tesa via!
Cristiano?
Tesa via!
As it turns out, one of the first Indians captured was actually Juan Ortiz, a survivor of a small, ill-fated attempt at colonization and conquest 11 years earlier under the command of Narvaez. Ortiz had been captured and tortured by the Indians, but eventually he learned to live with the local people. De Soto's spirits were raised. He had found an interpreter. Ortiz's experience with the native people opened his eyes to a different way of life. In the south were the coastal settlements of the Calusa, consisting of thatched buildings and complex maritime societies. To the north lay great chiefdoms like the Apalachee, Cofitachequi, and Coosa, who lived in large permanent settlements and relied on extensive agriculture, hunting, and fishing. They had well-organized communities with a strong system of social ranking. The most outstanding features of these cultures were great mounds that served as temple bases and burial sites. Many of these chiefdoms extended for hundreds of miles and consisted of many cultures and languages.
During his time with the Indians, Ortiz had heard about a powerful kingdom to the north, where warriors were said to wear helmets of gold. De Soto sent out a scouting party. They returned with a message that the gold could be found at a place called Cale. We left Pedro Calderon with our ships and 100 soldiers in reserve in the settlement we called Usita after the local chief. Our other goals of founding colonies and harbors in the New World for our great king, Charles V, were dashed from De Soto's mind. His obsession was treasure, so on we marched.
The captured Indians were forced into service as porters and guides. It helped the Spaniards move faster, but was torturous for the Indians and displaced them deep into areas inhabited by other tribes. As they reached Cale, near present-day Ocala, they once again heard familiar information. No gold or supplies here, just a little further on. The Indians were wise to the Europeans' violent determination to find this gold they so cherished. They had already had similar encounters with Ponce de Leon and Narvaez on their short expeditions. The surest way to rid their tribe of this menace was to talk of gold farther on. The tactic worked, and on they marched towards present-day Gainesville. But De Soto had tactics of his own. His strategy as he met with each new tribe was to take hostages and release them only after the chief agreed to lead his expedition to the territory of the next tribe. Brutal battles were often the result. Near present-day Live Oak, Florida, 400 Indian warriors prepared a surprise attack. But their bows and arrows were no match for the crossbows, gunpowder, horses, and steel blades of the Spaniards. All were killed or captured.
With tensions high with the Native Americans he relied on, he also turned to me, the Astrolabe, when needed during his expedition. Now here we are, back in present day, where you can visit the place where De Soto and his men made their original landfall for their expedition throughout Florida, or as they used to say, La Florida. They used me to navigate throughout their trail alongside the use of the Native Americans forced to be their guides. Throughout this whole mission, I was at the center of it all. Without me, they would have never made landfall where they had, and from the beginning, when I was invented in 6th century Europe, to being used at sea, to watch the latitude and star position to mark the course, and again, once De Soto was on land interacting with the natives. My biggest question I pose to you is, without me, where do you think they would have made landfall? If I was never created, would my Native American friends thrive and grow bigger? Or would someone else have come along? Now head over to where I am housed at the Visitor Center and watch the video about this expedition and think about this on your visit to De Soto National Memorial.